Morikawa, far and away, was the best guy who missed the cut in terms of ball striking. Very close to him was Max McGreevy, and then it was Chris Kirk.
You know, Chris Kirk would be a guy, and then a guy that did make the cut that we both loved last week. That I mean, he could go nuclear this week. Here is Matt McCarty. He definitely could. I mean, I don't know what happened to him in the middle of that. Like, if he had a bad steak or something, or he ran into Robert Allenby on Thursday night, and then like something bad happened, and then because the middle of that round on Friday, that guy went on walkabout, like he was out in a kayak and he was gone. He was with Smiley out in the waves. It was done.
At Mayo Experience.
Welcome to the final word on the American Express. This is the Pat Mayo Experience, powered by Underdog. Smash a like while you're here. Sub to Mayo Media Network. Be a friend. Do that fun stuff for us. Rate and review the audio podcast while you're at it. Tell some friends. Keith Stewart is live with me right now from Jupiter inside the TGL Dome. Looks nice.
Pat, I mean, this place is spectacular. If you love golf and you're a little bit techie, you got to get down here. I mean, even Feinberg's made it down here inside the SoFi Center, if you could believe it or not.
Have you hit a shot into that screen?
Yes, at the end of last year, I did.
Is it similar to hitting a real shot?
Oh, the shot feels real. It's just when it hits the screen, it's very humbling versus the guys that I'm going to see here in a couple of hours. I mean, even Kisner makes it look a lot better than I did that day. But I tell you what, if you were ever going to have like an unlimited budget for a bachelor party, this would be the place to do it. That's for sure.
Are they renting that out?
Oh yeah. Mayo Media Network. This is where the Christmas party should be next year. I could set that up.
Oh, they're doing the PA announcements behind you and everything. Like we're live on the scene right now. So I did want to pose you a question before we get started. And of course, you can always sub to Keith's newsletter at readtheline.com. Go check out the site. Highly recommend it. I posed the question to Jeff of who the guys that you don't unstar are, and you had like an answer for this.
Yeah, so I hear that on Monday's show, and I started laughing to myself, and I go, golly, there's got to be like a Hall of Fame of names that I'd be embarrassed to mention. And then I started thinking about it, and I do remember this. And I know it's not an awkward name, but the amount of time that this person must have been starred was extremely lengthy, because when Tiger came back for his first event after the car accident, he was starred on my PGA Tour Live.
So Tiger is so like when you open up a random tournament, like once every 8 years when Tiger plays, he just pops up?
Just popped up. He popped up at Riviera when he came back from the car wreck. Like almost 2+ years later. Tiger had been starred for that long, never saw him on the screen, and then he just popped up out of nowhere. Now, I can't even remember what the event would have been before that I would have been betting him, and why I would have been betting him to do anything. Maybe, I don't know, make the cut or something like that. So that's probably the embarrassing part, that I probably bet him outright, just like it's some stupid number. But it was pretty funny when I started thinking about your question, and I was like, man, I'm like, who could it really be? I mean, could it be Nico from last week? It's pretty embarrassing, but it wasn't. I had to think it was Tiger, and it was like 2+ years that he had been starred, and I didn't even know it. And then out of nowhere, he pops up, and there he is.
So I have started doing a live show on Wednesday nights. This week will be no different. 8 p.m. Eastern time on Mayo Media Network. I'll have the newsletter for free sent out before that. If you want to sub in the description right now. If not, you can read it at betspertsgolf.com, where I'll have all of the finalized plays, because I still only have 5 bets in as we're speaking right now. I got Russell Henley at 25-1. I got Kim at 40-1. He has dropped down to 28-30 in some spots. If you're in Canada, outside of Ontario, and you go to coolbet.com, under the PME exclusives tab, you too can still have Siwoo Kim at 40-1. They're offering that up there as a boost right now. So please go check that out. Hit the description. Get yourself some bonus funds on there as well to make those bets. Alex Smalley at 90. Chris Kirk at 200. Matt McCarty at 125. All of those are with top 8s to go along with them as a part of the each way. But I wanted to talk to you before I settled anything in, because there's 2 names that I'm floating around, because I really like Ben Griffin this week, but I don't know if I want to have 2 guys in the 20s. But Fitzpatrick's down to almost 40, and Struck is at 50, which I just found surprising.
Well, you know what? The last guy to defend at this place was Johnny Miller in 1976. So I don't know how I feel about the Sepp Straka chances at a tournament with this much, volatility when it comes to scoring. And final round action and just everything with the amateurs, 54-hole cut, all of the above. I mean, for all the reasons that we're trying to justify why we shouldn't bet Scottie, those are the reasons why I wouldn't think there would be a defending champion. But you've got some interesting names there. I was like very much into – it's a little mood lighting for you and I. I was very much into Chris Kirk last week, and he didn't show up, didn't make the cut. And, I mean, he's going to another place this week that he is very, very good.
And that's why I ended up back on him. It's not like he played poorly last week either, and the conditions were horrible.
The conditions were tough on Friday. It definitely got the better of him. And, a place where he'd had a ton of great history, it's just what it comes down to is he didn't get the job done. Neither did Nico. Some of our guys did, but you know what? There were some very interesting trends last week. Some guys hit the ball really, really good. Didn't putt well, but some guys hit the ball really, really good last week.
Well, Corey Connors would be number one on that map because that's what he always does. He hits the ball. Well, Siwoo was another one. That's why I ended up going to Siwoo. Dude couldn't buy a putt last week.
Dude, I'm all over Siwoo this week because he's played here. He started here, 8 times? He withdrew once, but in 7 times, he's gained positively with the putter 6 times. And in 5 of those, it's been 2 strokes or more. So he gained 11.5 shots last week, tee to green. Again, time's running out on Siwoo.
Well, then
he gained more than 11.5 shots last week, which was 2 better than anybody else, tee to green, and he lost 4.5 with the putter. He can gain with the putter here at the AMEX. He's done it before. He's won a bunch of top 25s, top 5. I love it.
So who are the other names that you're thinking about? Because I did mention Fitz. I had this discussion with Blickel on the DraftKings show that if you just had to power rank who you think are the best players in this field, it would be Scottie, number 1 by a ton. But who would be number 2? Like, do you really think Ben Griffin is a better player overall than Matt Fitzpatrick?
I think for the situation he is, yes. But overall, no. If we're going to the U.S. Open, I say no. But we are far from the U.S. Open this week at the Stadium course and then La Quinta and the Jack Nicklaus tournament course. So overall, I really think that I would have to put Ben Griffin second on my list. He's my first pick. He's the only guy I want to take near the bottom of that will probably be in the teens, but right now he's at 20. He would be the one guy.
So he's up to 25. That's the same number that I bet Russell Henley. When I came into the week, I wanted to have Griffin over Henley, but then I saw the odds drop, and Griffin was at 18, and Henley was at number 25 on the odds board. And all of a sudden, I was like, all right, I'll just bet Henley instead. But now they're about where they were. So I found that kind of interesting. That do I just reload and go Henley and Griffin with Siwoo and call that my week?
I'm pretty sure I'm going to go Henley, Griffin, and Siwoo right at the top. Then after that, there's going to be a bunch of guys that I'm going to hope that they can putt, but I know that they can strike the ball.
Well, hit me with these guys then. These are the guys I need to know about.
All right, so you're talking a lot about Smalley, all right? And Smalley's got great history here. The Duke grad, we love him. Great ball striker. But you know what? You know who's striking the ball even better is Ryan Gerard. And you know what? This guy's been on a mission. The fact that he went to Mauritius and got in the Masters, he put so much pressure on himself in that moment, and I kind of feel like that gave him a lot of confidence. He headed into the Sony. The guy played really, really well last week, and he gained with the putter. What he gained, 1.5 strokes with the putter. If he could do that again with his ball striking at the AMEX, I think he'll do very, very well.
So I think if you go on what we're looking for current form coming in, he's probably the best in the field in regards to that, especially after last week. But how much do you think last week, especially when we take a look at some of the ball striking? I mean, he's a lower ball hitter, obviously Goddard won, and we saw a lot of these wind guys that we associate with playing well in the wind end up coming through at the Sony Open like we did last week, that maybe when we get to a wedge birdie fest where you now all of a sudden have to make all of these putts, that all of a sudden maybe Ryan Gerard isn't near the top. I'm looking for ways to not go after Ryan Gerard here because he's down to 55-1. He's the same as Kitayama. Hell, he's almost the same as Straka now. This is why Straka started populating back in my mind. If he hadn't have won last year, wouldn't you look at Straka at 50 and be like, perfect, that sounds right?
Well, here's the thing. And a lot of people are going to talk this week about you could just spray it anywhere and you could play very, very well. I don't believe that that's the case. I believe this is a little bit more of an accuracy contest off of the tee. And some of these guys that have won here are great drivers of the golf ball. Siwoo, Rahm twice. You know, the guys put the ball in play. They're just not putting it everywhere. And with the renovation in 2024 to the Stadium course and how hard those greens played last year, even if you're in that rye overseed that's like 2 inches long, you lose a lot of spin control. And we saw last year that those guys, they had to have a pretty good around the game, around the green acumen in order to try to contend on Sunday. So, like, I think some of the accuracy that we've seen out of like a Smalley and a Gerard gives them an advantage. And yes, it's going to be a putting contest, but at the end of the day, I think it gives Gerard a better chance because he's going to put the ball in play. I'm going to lean on some driving accuracy this week, more so than I think a lot of pundits are.
So I overweighted it in the model that I used at the Rabbit Hole. If you want to bring up my model, you can do that under the expert models. I don't know why I'm considered under the expert model, but hey, that's where you can find it if you need to find it. And obviously that's where Siwoo comes into play. That's where Rico Hoey comes into play. But I'm starting to think about some of the other guys that just gain a ton off the tee in general. Like, I've brought up David Ford, I think, on each of the shows so far. I haven't bet him yet, but I feel like I want to buy low on David Ford before he has a breakthrough.
Well, you know what? I understand why you're going there with David Ford, but I think when you start to think about some of the driving accuracy concerns here, the first place that comes to mind for me is TPC Twin Cities. And there's a lot of guys that have been very good there that have been good here. You know, Johnny Vegas, Lee Hodges is another one. Lee Hodges is sitting way the heck down the board at plus 250. That number may have moved this morning while I was traveling, but Lee Hodges, he's got a top 3 here, and he has back-to-back, Pat, top 10s on the PGA Tour, and he gained like over 7 strokes with the putter last week. So if you're telling me you got to put the ball in play, you've got to be good with your short irons into these greens, and you got to be a good putter. I mean, Lee Hodges checks all those boxes, and you could get like a 13-1 on him for a top 10.
See, that I can play around with. A 13-1 top 10, I think makes some sense. Maybe even a top 20 at this course for him. He's down to 140-1 in the betting market now.
So he's lost 100 points in the time that it took me to fly from New York down here to Palm Beach. There's a lot of steam around him because he just makes a lot of sense. And he was, like I think 7th or 9th at the RSM when I was there. And then at the Sony, he was just 6th?
Yeah, basically everything that you think that you're getting from JT Poston, you could potentially get from Lee Hodges here.
I'm sorry, you broke up there.
I said that he's kind of equivalent to the type of player like JT Poston that you would take for 50 points less.
Yeah, very much so, yeah. Except I think that he's a little bit more accurate off the tee than Poston can be. When you come to this style of golf course, I think that gives him a little bit of an edge. But again, going back down, like when you start to talk about those guys like Smalley and Gerard and and some of the other guys like Jacob Bridgman hit it really good last week, and we know he can be good with the putter. This could be a very good spot for him. And if we're 6-7ing between Smalley and Bridgman, I'm going to go Bridgman this week.
Well, it's funny that you brought up Twin Cities. Why not Kitayama then?
Well, certainly Kitayama is somebody that I love in a DFS sense. I also love him in a one and done sense because he's going to survive the cut. He's just going to hang around. I went with volatility last week with Nico, and I got burned. Right. So this week, when you're looking at something like that, if you don't want to use a Russ or somebody near the top of the board, I think a guy like Kurt Kitayama is going to be hanging around the whole time. And if he gets the putter going, I mean, he'll be like Siwoo. He'll out ball strike everybody. If the putter pops even the slightest bit, like it did when he won last year at 3M, then Kurt's a fantastic choice.
So you're now in a spot where Gerard is 55-1, Kitayama is 55-1. If you had to bet one of those guys, you would bet on Gerard?
I would, just because of the recent history.
Okay.
The very recent history.
So to kind of circle back to the types of guys that you were talking about, if we go long shot wise, Doug Gim was a player that I wanted to bring up. He who lost 4.5 strokes on approach last week. Not typical of Doug Gim.
So when a guy doesn't have his DNA, Pat, that's when I get worried. When I'm out walking the range and a guy who's like, Will Zalatoris is like a stripe show. I remember this last year at Torrey, and it was bouncing off the net from side to side in the range there because it's netted down both sides. I was like, whoa, okay, that's outside of his realm. Like we need him to putt good. We don't need him to ball strike good. So when I see a guy getting away from his DNA, that's when I stay away. If the guy is doing the things like Ryan Gerard and he gained with the putter last week, then I start to feel like, you know what? The trend is your friend here. I mean, first of all, there's a huge trend. I know you mentioned it the other day. I know it's 9 of the last 10 either played it. They all played in Hawaii at least once before they came in and won. But you had the trend running even deeper than that, right?
Yeah, it's in my article. I think it's like 15 of the past 17, something crazy like that. But here's the one point I want to make about Doug Gim before we go. So the worst approach week of his career was weirdly at the Sony Open in 2020, when he lost almost 5 strokes on approach. Do you know what he did the next week at the American Express?
Top 10.
Top 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 2 of the 4 worst approach weeks of his career have come at Waialae. So maybe there's just something about that course that he does not see.
It's funny, outside of the Bermuda grass and the switch over to Poa Trivialis, it's interesting. There's a lot of similarities between those 2 golf courses, for sure. You got to put the ball in play, and you got to hit your wedge as well. We won't see the wind, but you're going to see some bounce in the greens, especially on the Pete Dye Stadium course. So there's definitely a lot of similarities. If a guy played good last week, I think you have to pay attention to him this week, Pat.
I agree with that, but I'm also looking for skill fits from like these. Do you buy into there's a reason that long shots have won at this course so often? I believe it's the second highest number on average of an outright winner over the past 10 years.
Because the skill set required is closest to the floor on the PGA Tour. So the things that you really need to do well, there's a lot of forced layups off the tee. It's not always just bombing away. It happens a lot on the par 5s. So if you're really good with a wedge, if you are extremely good with your putter that week on those POA flat greens, if you're an accuracy merchant, from inside 50 yards, like a lot of these everyone talks about par 5 scoring and they start thinking about hitting them in 2. A lot of these par 5s, you end up inside 75 yards, inside 100 yards. The winners gain a ton on the field from inside 100 yards on approach. And that's not something we normally pay attention to. Everyone's going to look at that 100 or 125 to 150, like kind of range bucket. But you really have to pay attention to, scrambling almost from that like 75-yard shot on the short par 4s. I mean, how many par 4s are like right around 400 yards? These guys bomb it down there, and all of a sudden they have 85 yards in very quickly. They put themselves in a position you got to be able to score that way. And pretty much everyone can do that on the PGA Tour, and you see that a lot. And that's why you get the big numbers here winning.
So if we start to think about those 3 elements, because I actually built this out in my model on the rabbit hole, I went 50 to 100 yard proximity, then 100 to 150 yards, and combined those 2 together and mixed it with driving accuracy. And this is where David Ford continues to come up. He's number 1 in accuracy. He's 17th from 100 to 150. He gets a bit worse, although he has a very limited sample when you go from 50 to 100. The best player in all 3 of those is Takumi Kanaya.
Oh my God. So I'll definitely have Kanaya on my placement board, and he'll be on my DFS, some of my DFS boards. I mean, Kanaya just keeps showing up week after week after week. Do I think he's like a top 10 player? Not quite yet. But Takumi Kanaya is somebody definitely to pay attention to, especially in live matchups over the weekends. I cleaned up with him in the fall. I love Kanaya, and the guy continues to impress me.
Okay, so he rates out really well. Snedeker, and then Max McGreevy is just sitting there, who does all 3 of these things excellently.
I mean, McGreevy, people were talking about him last week. The ball striking was very good at Waialae. And, again, this week, I can't argue against it. Another way that you can filter 2 more things. So those 3 things are really important to me this week, but there's 2 more. Sepp Straka was 7 under on the par 3s last year when he won. That's definitely a key here. There aren't most weeks. I always break down strokes gained by the winner by the different par categories. And par 3 is always the lowest. Par 3 is the second highest this year behind par 4s. Now, that's a quantity issue, but there's 12 par 3s, and more than half of them are over 200 yards. If you're gaining a ton on the par 3s this week, Sepp was 7 under last year on the ones that he played. What's that, 16 of them? It's like, that's really, really strong par 3 play. And over 200 yards, I would definitely lean towards guys like that as well if you want to throw that in the filter and see what spits out.
That's interesting, but I mean, you would know this being at the courses. Not every single 210-yard par 3 is created equally.
You're 100% right, but the numbers back this up. Guys that have won here are gaining on the par 3s more so than a lot of other golf courses. So there's an opportunity in order to catch us some stroke streaks, because everyone's going to birdie the par 5s. So that's not a place where you separate or differentiate. You always catch me talking about this. It's like, it's a low barrier for entry to birdie the par 5s this week. You have to be really good on the 4s, and the 3s are a place to separate. And another thing you could throw in the model that I wanted to touch upon was that everyone just looks at birdie or better percentage this week. and they're like, these courses are easy. I don't need to see bogey avoidance or anything like that. But it's not just good enough to take Sam Burns because he makes 5 birdies a round on average throughout, his season on the PGA Tour. Like, what's his birdie to bogey ratio? Does he make any bogeys? Because you just can't slow down the F1 car this week. You cannot go backwards. You can make like really good pars, a 10-footer for par, move on, and then go birdie, par, birdie or something like that. But you just can't. You can't have these bogey. You certainly can't have double bogey moments if you're trying. I mean, Vegas has the over-under this week, Pat said. It's 26.5. So they expect this thing to go pretty deep. And I just think that if you're going to just like really target birdie scorers and take that birdie percentage, you're not looking at, because like then you just get guys that make a ton of birdies. But who also doesn't make that many bogeys? I know it's Scheffler, but at the same time, there's other guys there that's where I've come down to this list of guys that I am like super targeting. And then the fact that they were hot last week at Sony makes me feel even better about them.
So let's see here. Bogey avoidance. We can go to birdie or better and look at bogey avoidance at the same time. Shockingly, Scottie's number 1 in both. Okay, that's good. Noren rates out really well, as does Rasmus Højgaard. Mac Meisner is excellent at this, his birdie to bogey ratio. And then you have some other guys who are kind of off the map the other way, like Justin Rose, for example, is 11th in birdie or better. He is 92nd in bogey avoidance of anyone in this field. Another guy who's really good. So Pearson Coody is very interesting then, because he putts really well. He doesn't make a ton of bogeys, and he drives the ball really well for a guy who's long off the tee. Like he gained, I think he was top 5 in strokes gained off the tee last week. I think he's number 1 overall coming in over the past 6 months. Plus he can fill it up in a lot of spots. He's just a very, how can I say this? It's not that he's a bad iron player or wedge player. He's very inconsistent with his irons.
Maybe he found something on Sunday. He played well Sunday. And, on this Sunday, you might be saying, Pearson Coody all of a sudden, like straight out of Gone with the Wind. That's what you want to target. Rose is the example of what you won't want to do, and Noren makes perfect sense. Of course, Scottie makes sense. And you always say this, if you model something out and Scottie's not first, then you're doing it wrong. But Noren also qualifies for that, because think about how good Noren plays on easy golf courses. Like how many times, like I can always remember him showing up at like TPC Craig Ranch, easy golf course, right? Because when he does make a mistake, his short game is one of the best in the game. And he just saves that par, he moves on, and then he's a great wedge player, and he moves on, and the guy can score.
As anyone who's ever bet on Harry Hall can attest, very high in birdies, not great at bogey avoidance somehow.
Yeah, and that's why, I think Harry Hall is a great top 20 or top 10 bet if you want to kind of like, walk that line. But I don't think he's a good outright winner, because as you see, when the pressure hits, the guy starts to make a couple of loose bogeys, and then it just won't work in these events where you have to have like 24 under. You just can't make a bogey over the weekend that's not like saving from a double. Like situation. You just can't make a bogey.
So if we're looking at players that rate top 30 in both birdies or better and bogey avoidance, you're looking at Scheffler, Ben Griffin, Mac Meisner, Michael Thorbjornsen. What else do we have here? Lee Hodges doesn't make a lot of bogeys, but he doesn't make a lot of birdies at the same time. That's tough. Pearson Coody is right up there. And then we're into Alex Noren, Max Homa, Wacky Valimaki is up there, Rasmus Højgaard, and Christoph Ventura. That is the entire list.
Again, there are definitely some guys in there that were decent last week or have proven they're good on soft or easy golf courses. And those are the types of guys that I'm going to be looking for in matchups and all different sorts of situations. That wasn't a full list of outrights, but I've given you 5 points with which to filter for your model. And this is one of them, but I just, everyone gets so jazzed up over birdie or better percentage. And you have to remember in shootouts, you have to have a good birdie to bogey ratio. And that's my PSA.
So I'll add in BOB and bogey avoidance, and I'll throw in that par 3 range that you were talking about. And I'll save this. I'll put it out right now, and I'll save it up on the rabbit hole. And we'll go to, would you rather the par 3 average from that distance, or would you rather the par 3 birdies or better from that average?
Oh, give me birdies or better. These guys are all good. They're making pars. So give me the guys that are going to spike for me.
All right. So BOB par 3, we'll throw that in. I'll go create this model, and I will give you who we need to look at. So we have those 2 wedge ranges that we were looking at. They'll get rid of course history, conditions, putting on What is the difference between putting on POA Travalis and regular POA in Bermuda? Like, is this just Bermuda with overseed? Is that what this is?
Okay, so generally, well, okay, so Poa annua, when people just call it Poa, that's what you see at like Torrey. That's the bumpy one in the afternoon. Poa trivialis is a different grain that they tend to use on Bermuda grass in the winter. You see it at Scottsdale, you see it at Sawgrass, you see it at a number of different places. If it's a really good, like it will be this week in Palm Springs, if Poa trivialis will almost model like bent. And I've gotten that from two independent tour putting coaches. John Graham and Phil Kenyon both told me that. They're like, I would not treat it like Poa whatsoever. I would treat it like bent, because that's how smooth they can make it. That's how firm and fast and smooth they can make it. So that's kind of the biggest difference between the two. If you start, flagging for Poa, you've got to be really looking at those Poa places where the seed head pops. And again, that's not the Northeast Poa like we saw at Bethpage, or I have at my home course, right? That stuff gets like super burned out in the summertime, and then that is like lightning. Total, that's like a third different consideration. But trivialis, like we're going to see on some of the courses this week, it's almost as smooth as bent and not grainy whatsoever.
Underdog's expanding the game. You already know their player picks. Pick higher or lower on player stats. Today, Underdog prediction markets are live in 25 states. Back your squad with spreads, handicap for closer game, or totals, higher lower combined score, combined with player picks for bigger payouts. New customers play $5 on fantasy, get $75 in fantasy bonus entries. Code Mayo. Team picks, player picks, all on Underdog. Eat better. Train smarter. Maybe stop pretending frozen mystery meat is good enough. And honestly, starting strong is the easiest way when the food doesn't suck to get yourself ready to start the new year. That's where Omaha Steaks comes in. Premium, perfectly portioned protein shipped straight to my door. No guessing, no waste, just legit quality that actually fuels what you're trying to do. I loaded up on their USDA certified tender steaks and gourmet burgers, threw a couple fillets on the grill, which is out my back door, and there's not that much snow, so I can access it pretty easily. Salt, pepper, done, instantly tender. Way more flavor, better texture, zero stress compared to anything I've really cooked before. Let Omaha Steaks deliver high-quality proteins right to your door. Visit omahasteaks.com and get an extra $35 off with promo code MAYO at checkout. That's OMAHA steaks.com, promo code MAYO. Terms apply. See site for details. So I'll say this is Pat and Keith. Pat and Keith AMEX. And see what this gives us. Save it as an expert report on the rabbit hole if you're looking for it. So it's Henley number 1, Scheffler, Putnam, Kuchar, Grillo, Gim, the Smother Man, Seamus Power, Takumi Kanaya, Matt McCarty, Nico Echeverria, Max McGreevy, Daniel Berger, then Siwoo.
I mean, a number of those make a lot of sense. You start to compare that with recent, like really close recent form and course history here, and you can see why people are going to be all over Berger this week. People are going to be all over Siwoo this week. Scottie's self-explanatory. The stats are going to tell you that Nico is going to be good. He makes a ton of putts. He's a good wedge player, puts the ball in play off the tee. He's good at putting on these surfaces for sure. So like all of that makes sense to me. I think it's just a matter of you got to look at, and this is where you got to step away from the numbers for a second. Like what did the sniff test last week down there at Wailea, what did we see take place? And incorporate some of that into your own, model fine-tuning at the end, Pat.
Well, so I guess it's a bit difficult because of the conditions, where these conditions this week in PGA West in La Quinta are just not going to be similar at all to what we saw in Hawaii.
But if a guy struck the ball, what I'm talking about purely is if a guy struck the ball really, really well last week, he's still going to strike it really, really well this week. The putter could change because we're talking about different grasses.
What is the influence that you think that the wind might have on some of these shorter putts? Because guys were just missing them.
I think that coverage gives a lot of excuses at the end of the day. I think that some guys struggle on Bermuda. I mean, it's the surface they struggle the most on. And with the wind and the growing conditions out there and the fact that they got hit with rain, like a half an inch of rain on Tuesday night into Wednesday, that would have spiked growth. That would have given you a ton of grain over the next couple of days. They wouldn't have mowing the greens really low. Why? Because they knew it was going to be super windy. So now you've got longer greens. They're going to show more grain, that are really, really healthy, that were recently like naturally watered, not with irrigation. I mean, like that's a perfect storm for a ton of like grainy Bermuda grass putting that most guys just aren't good at, Pat.
I mean, that's completely fair. One guy I was looking at that he came T13 last week, and we had the discussion about him last week that no one was talking about him. He was the first round leader and second round leader, ended up coming T13. But another spot where he has played historically really well is Nick Taylor, and he had a good week.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Taylor's been a good desert rat. You know, he and Adam Hadwin, I can remember year after year after year playing well here, playing well in Scottsdale. Something about those Canadians just want to get out of the cold, and they're fired up to play, golf early in the season. I mean, Canadians are so fired up, Pat, that earlier when I walked in, Brooke Henderson was back there hitting shots into the screen. Pretty cool.
How is she looking? She's on the LTGL, right?
She is. She's on the WTGL, women's TGL. But next week is a place that she's always played very, very well. Lake Nona. They have the Hilton Grand Vacations Tournament of Champions. The LPGA kicks off next week in Orlando. So it makes sense she's down here working on her game and getting ready. That's a place where next week, I wish I had a chance to talk to her, but instead I'm talking to you. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, point being is that I would have loved to have got a sense from her because she'd be one of those players who didn't have I know she won last year, but she didn't have the greatest season last year. She might get a nice number going into Lake Nona next week. And with a limited field, Brooke is always great in Florida. Definitely an auto bet if the number makes sense next week.
What would an appropriate number on Brooke next week do you think would that be? Would it be 25 to 1? Would it be 16 to 1? Would it be 40 to 1? Like, what are you looking at for her to open at?
I mean, with her history at that golf course, it's got to be above 20 for me. You think that the numbers get bad for the favorites on the men's side. On the ladies' side, it gets extremely top heavy, especially in a field like that, which is only going to have like 30 something ladies in it, maybe like 32 or something like that, because it's the last 2 years worth of winners and then whoever wants to show up. And then they pair them up with, Annika and Marty Fish, and they have a big pro-am. Taylor Twellman and all those folks. It's a great event. I've covered it many times. It's a ton of fun. But the Florida players on the LPGA that are really, really good, like Brooke, tend to show up in that event and play very well.
Question for you. I've posed this to every guest that I've had so far this week, so I want you to just give me your thoughts on it. I think that Scottie Scheffler has a better chance to win the PGA Championship at these odds than he does the American Express.
100% correct. Yes. 100% correct. You got to think about it. Again, there's a very low barrier for entry to be the champion. I mean, Hudson Swafford's done it twice. I mean, that guy sounds like a clothing line. It's like, what are we talking about? Hudson Swafford's walking up to the champs table twice at this place in the last decade, whereas like Scottie, his best finish is like 17th or something like that. It's too easy a test with too much volatility in scoring. And then all of a sudden you get to the final day, somebody goes nuclear with the putter, and then it's over. You need the golf course to chat. Now, don't get me wrong. Everyone's going to be like, oh, Keith, what about TPC Craig Ranch? He boat raced everybody, won by 8. Yeah, you're right. But you know what? I'm also right. All these shootouts, he tends to just finish somewhere around the top 10. Will Scottie be there? Sure. He'll be 5 back with 9 to go on Sunday, Pat. He'll still be like 3 to 1. So, I mean, trust me, we all know what can happen, but I'm going with Scottie in my outright market this week, and that's further proof that I think that your question, any major, I mean, he could be even money at the Masters this year, and that's a better bet than this is at what it is, plus 260.
What about the other guys, the other big name players? We've talked about Griffin, Henley, and Siwoo. We both like all three of those guys. When we think about, Ludwig's here, Bobby Mack is here, Cantlay and Burns are both playing in this event. Matty Fitz is going to be suiting up as well for the first time in America so far this season. Do you have any particular opinions on those guys, or are they just kind of fades even at pretty good numbers?
Well, people ask me all the time. They're like, why do you come in here and you watch simulator golf? Well, it gives me some edges in certain ways. And plus, it's a little less expensive to fly down here and watch professional athletes compete than it is to go to Hawaii right now. So I can come down here 5 or 6 times for what it would cost me to go to the Sony for 1 week, and maybe I see something. But I'm not going to see Ludwig. I'm not going to see Cantlay. Hey, Cantlay started the TGL season with a precautionary injury and sat out. And we don't know what's going on there. Guy's walking around in loafers, and now all of a sudden we're going to bet him at 20 to 1. at an event that's a birdie fest, and the only club he struggles with is the putter. Everybody knows I'm a huge Cantlay fan, but this is not well suited to. It's well suited to him to be top 15 for sure because talent. But we're talking about a guy that dropped down to the mid 20s in official world golf rankings. Ludwig only gets 5 tee shots here in the Thunderdome, and he hit 3 of them in the water when he played. Now, fast forward to the fact that I've already mentioned numerous times that you got to be able to score from 50 yards and in here. So Ludwig, his biggest struggles come, especially in majors, he doesn't score from close range. So that, and the fact that his putter kind of hems and haws from time to time, that gives me pause on those 2 guys. So those are my direct answers on them.
What about Fitz?
Fitz is one of those guys that he's got so much talent and he's played so very well since the PGA last year. I mean, since he was 8th there, like he's played so good. He does scare me this week, not as much as Scottie would scare me, but I also believe that this is the type of golf course where for Matthew Fitzpatrick to have his full complement of advantages, it needs to be a little bit harder.
Okay, I can get
too many names in the mix that could just get lucky on a Sunday versus Matty Fitz.
I can see it that way, but I also just remember Matty Fitz from the European Tour when he was winning events at -27.
Again, we're wrong more than we're right, Pat. But Matt, there's a reason why that winners keep coming from Hawaii, from the Century or the Sony. Well, we only have the Sony this year. Those guys are warmed up. They're a little more battle tested. A number of these guys, I don't know the way they think. I just see the way that they approach these opening weeks. Other than the Scotties and the Tigers are the guys that are super, super driven. The Jordan mindset. Win at all costs. I will play my hardest every night because what if this is the only time in my career you ever get to see me play, right? That mentality, it puts those guys in contention all the time. But a number of these guys, they tend to show up and put the hard work in that first week. And then 2-3 weeks in, boom, there you go. I mean, we don't know who the field is going to be next week at Farmers, but Matty Fitz at Farmers, for me, on a U.S. Open style course versus this week against a birdie fest, I would go next week, Pat. And if I get burned, you know what I mean? At least we talked about it.
I suppose that's fair. One point, because I brought that up to Alex Blickel as well, and he kind of pushed back at me with the getting warmed up because I felt like there was something to it. Even when I spoke with Michael Kim about it, that's why he likes playing in that early event. He's like, yeah, you probably don't want to bet on me in the first event of the year. I'm 2 to 3 tournaments down, then I'm warmed up for the year, then I'm in my groove, and then you can start thinking about it just a little bit. But he had made mention that a lot of the reason that we see so many guys having played in Hawaii before winning the American Express is because Century used to be there and all the best guys played at Century. And if they played in the American Express, well, they were just the best players in that field too.
I mean, I just think about Ben Griffin, right? Ben Griffin's been in a great mindset. The guy won WWT. We think back to last year and it was he won 3 times. It was over the summer, right? No, the guy won in November, right? And then he cruised into the holidays. He accomplished another life goal. He got married to his sweetheart, and now he's back on tour. The guy looked pretty good last week. And, you and I in the preview show, we were like, he's probably going to fall out of the top 10 and not win 3 times again. But this is a place where he's had back-to-back, top 9 finishes in the last 2 years and put the ball in play off the tee, relatively long, wedge fest, putter, get up and down when you need to. I mean, that's what that guy has done in order to win. And he could certainly go low because he did it down at El Diamante.
I guess my question with him would just be if you had to coin flip it and can only take one, why would he be in a better option than Henley, who does everything you just said except hit it as far better than Ben Griffin?
I guess historically, you and I go back a long way. You think about all the times that Russell has not closed the deal. And when Griffin's been in a closer position, the guy has shut the door on the field. So if they're both playing very well, in recent history, Ben's is way better at AMEX. Russell doesn't have a very good history at AMEX. He's got a bunch of missed cuts and everything. I still think he's a different player than he was 3 years ago. But that being said, that's why I'm leaning on Griffin versus Henley. But Pat, I'm betting both at the top of the board. They're in the 20s. I'm betting those guys, and then I'm going down to Siwoo at whatever number in the 40s, the high 40s, or on Wednesday, when the numbers tend to jump and fluctuate and people put boosts out and everything, then I'm going to try to do the best I can.
Yeah, well, you can't do it because you're in Florida, but if you are in Canada outside of Ontario, then you can get Siwoo at 40 right now. Yeah, he's been bet down to 30, but Cantlay and Burns are up to 33 to 1.
And with good reason. Sam Burns, you talk about, for 4 of those traits that I discussed with you, Sam Burns is the guy. It's the birdie to bogey ratio. Sam Burns will make like 9 birdies a round on average. The problem is he makes like 3 or 4 bogeys. And in an event like this, that's what had him lose to an amateur 2 years ago. It catches up with you over 72 holes. And if anybody, especially due to the injury in here or supposed precautionary, like holding out of TGL play, I mean, you're hitting into a simulator, right? Cantlay didn't want to play the first night. Like, he would definitely be a guy that I feel like would be like ramping up. And his thing is like, I'm going to play really good at Genesis because I love that golf course. And like AMEX is a total warm up for me.
What would you want to do this week for a one and done? If it's your one and done team, you said, well, you went Nico last week, right?
I went volatility last week. This week, I'm going to change what I want to do. And I'm going to go with somebody who absolutely struck the ball almost perfectly last week and can survive 3 days here and has proven that he putts well here. I'm going to go Siwoo.
So you're going to go Siwoo. I was leaning Siwoo as well. I think Berger's in play. I think Henley or Griffin is in play too for me because I don't know where else I'm going to use them.
So my backup is Henley. So read the line. I always put a one and done pick and an alternate. So sometimes people have taken further in the year the person I say because they didn't take whoever I selected earlier in the year. So I always put an alternate too. But those are my 2 guys I was deciding over.
All right. Do you have any head-to-heads, placement, or anything else you want to talk about the course?
I think that if we really look at some of the guys that played good last week, further down the placement board, or when you're looking in that 6 and 7K range, guys like Jacob Bridgman, guy like Seamus Power, when it's a wedge fest, can be a dangerous guy. And he's proven before that he can score at will and get the putter hot. He kind of looked, and I know he has an advantage in the wind because he's a great wind player, but I feel like that was another name to pay attention to. We've talked about Hodges a bunch. And I do agree with you. I was gonna touch upon Smalley for a high placement just because, you don't win every outright, so it's a nice balance for breaking down some units that obviously aren't going to work out on the outright board, and I'll counter that with like an Alex Smalley top 30 or 40, whatever I can get a good positive number on.
Well, what about your boy Johnny Kiefer? Because his ball striking was immaculate last week. He couldn't chip or putt. Is that just potentially a Bermuda-related thing?
Well, you know what? Here's unless you're my buddy John Hasselbauer, who told me he's betting 14 guys this week. And God knows what's the unit breakdown on that. But 14 guys. Somebody put up a picture on X, and it said it was the PDF of the field, and they said this is my betting card for the Amex, which is kind of where you run into this week because everybody puts like $1 on guys that are 400 to 1. Further and further and further down the board. I just feel like you can't bet everybody. I did like some things out of Kiefer last week, but there are also some things I didn't. I could justify it by saying this is a glorified Korn Ferry Tour event where you got to shoot 25 under, and he was really good at those last year. Or I could say that, he might end up on the range one morning next to Scottie Scheffler and, need to use the Porta-John after that and throw up. I don't know, but like I wasn't in love with what I saw last week, and I was in love with it back at the RSM. So for me, it's going to be a wait and see with him a little bit more.
So guys that were top 20 last week in ball striking, just to go from like 20 down to 1 that have interest this week. So David Ford was 19th. Kitayama was 18th. Nick Taylor was 17th. Haotong was 16th. Sam Stevens, Harry Hall, Matt McCarty, Goddard, Morikawa, who missed the cut, still ranked out that highly because he could not chip or putt. Berger, Kiefer, Adam Scott, Patrick Rogers, Bobby Mack, Ryan Gerard, Corey Connors, and Siwoo Kim. Those were your best ball strikers from a week ago.
Sometimes I can't tell when you're coming at me with hyperbole, but you obviously really like that Patrick Rogers, Matt McNeely comparison last week.
I do.
God. I used to do a show at Wiley last year, and he used to go nuts because people would bet Patrick Rogers like at Quail Hollow at 300 to 1, like just burning money. It was like a shtick between he and I. That Patrick Rogers had a really successful career. Patrick Rogers, you got to give him a credit. He was really good last week. He was strong at the Sony. And this would be a situation out there on the West Coast where if you want to take a flyer on Patrick Rogers to ever show up, like a Landry or a Long or somebody like that, or Hudson Swafford, I mean, he could be your guy this week. I'm not flying to the moon with Buck Rogers, but I mean, if you want to, go right ahead.
Here's the issue with Patrick Rogers is that anytime that he gets a pulse, his odds suck. Like he's 85 to 1 to win. I can bet Nick Taylor at 85 to 1.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said the issue.
That is the prime. Like if he was 300 to 1 in this tournament, I would bet him at 300 to 1. Fine. That's what, a 0.33% win probability? Perfect. That sounds about what he's actually having.
Yeah, that Vegas is right on that one for sure.
Yeah, but they're not. The problem is Vegas is putting him at 85 to 1. Like, does he have a better chance to win this tournament than Brian Harman? Not that I'm betting Brian Harman, but no.
Brian Harman has a decent history here.
He does. He was very bad last week.
He was definitely a guy that was hunting like until the day before he left to go to Wailea. No doubt about it. That guy was using that as a warm-up week, 1,000%. There's no doubt about that.
But there were some other guys who, like I said, just kind of popped up. Like of the guys who missed the cut last week, the best ball strikers. So the guys that got hampered by around the green and putting, which you said, like conditions, maybe not a ton of practice in the offseason, but guys who historically do better at that. It was Morikawa, far and away, was the best guy who missed the cut in terms of ball striking. Very close to him was Max McGreevy, and then it was Chris Kirk.
Chris Kirk would be a guy, and then a guy that did make the cut that we both loved last week. That I mean, he could go nuclear this week. Here is Matt McCarty. He definitely could. I mean, I don't know what happened to him in the middle of that. Like, if he had a bad steak or something, or he ran into Robert Allenby on Thursday night, and then like something bad happened, and then because the middle of that round on Friday, that guy went on walkabout, like he was out in a kayak and he was gone. He was with Smiley out on the waves. It was done. I mean, he bogey 8, he blows it over the green on 9, makes double or something or 7 and bogey. It's terrible. Like what just happened? And up until that point, the guy was reasonably putting himself in position to do some damage over the weekend, which would have been nice.
And his number keeps getting worse and worse. I bet it at open because after we talked last week and following him all week, it's like, hey, it wasn't a bad week. And I can see where he blew it. He just went on these weird bogey runs, which weirdly, when you look at his bogey avoidance, isn't something that he does all that often. And usually, like the shot that you mentioned on 9, we were actually texting back and forth about that. Like, what the hell happened? Here, did he just misjudge the wind? Like, maybe he's a shit wind player.
I mean, that could be the case. It wasn't windy when he won at Bank of Utah. I don't know enough about his Korn Ferry Tour career to speak accurately about that, but I mean, he blew that green. Shot Tracer had it in the gray, 300 yards to the unknown. I mean, the thing was gone. It was, and I was like, what are we doing? Because he was sitting in the center of the fairway. I think he had like 276 or something like that in, or maybe even less. And he just hit it like 300 yards. And then that was it. And then from there, he hit it in a bunker. He made double from there. Couldn't even hit it on the green the second time. Something spooked him. I don't know what it is, but
and then he went on a bogey run. Like he was, and then played. Then on Saturday he played his way back into it, and like kind of the same thing happened to him on the back 9.
Yeah, the inconsistency there gives me pause. Certainly for this week, which is why I'm pumping the brakes there, and I'm heading in a different direction with a couple other guys.
Yeah, I'm willing
Griffin
to go
Henley,
back.
Siwoo, Ryan G. I'm in between on Jacob. I don't know, but my bomb is going to be Sweet Lee Hodges.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you got your Hodges number in already because that number keeps dropping. And like to look at Kiefer right now, Kiefer's 200 to 1. I might actually take a shot on that.
I mean, Lee Hodges is technically a poor man, Johnny Kiefer.
And with half the odds now.
Yeah, you're right.
All right. Did you prepare any questions for me, sir?
Oh, come on. This is my favorite. This is the one thing I look forward to all week. Rapid fire. Pat Mayo, come on now. You ready?
Hit me with it.
All right. Better course, La Quinta Country Club or TPC Craig Ranch?
La Quinta.
Did you make your bed this morning?
No.
Who will have a better week this week? Ludwig or Max Homa?
Max Homa.
Ooh. All right. If you were reincarnated as an animal, what animal would you choose?
A fox.
Sly like a fox. Like a gray winter fox or like a red
Right,
fox?
orange with the white.
Do you have any hole-in-ones?
No,
Oh, do you have any tattoos?
no,
Scotty, win this week, yes or no?
no.
Describe the Amex in one word.
Peaceful.
All right, Pat. It's been great spending the day with you. Take them away.
Last thing I wanted to ask you, with a 3-course rotation, what does that mean to the players? I asked Michael Kim this, and he couldn't really articulate it in the way that I think that he wanted to. But like from your observations, and we only have one of these now because Pebble Beach is different, but does it throw guys off? Do some people like it? Like, how does that work?
I would definitely say, just like amateur golfers, professionals love momentum. So if you could start easy and work your way into the week and then, play the whole weekend on stadium, that would be the way they would prefer to do it. If you ask the guys behind the scenes or on the range, they would love to just start with one of the easy ones and then work their way into it. And then by the weekend, just play the stadium back to back, have the most familiarity with it. That's the way they would prefer to do it.
Well, good news for everyone who is good in this tournament, or at least perceived to be good, because they're all getting to play the stadium course on Saturday.
Well, yes. TV has its privileges.
So is that an inherent advantage to those guys?
Well, that and their talent, but yes, it adds to it.
All right.
For sure.
Keith Stewart,
Yeah.
readtheline.com. Who do you got in TGL?
Oh, tonight it's Jupiter Stinks versus LA Golf Club. LA, you got to lay a lot of wood. So take them, you got to compound your interest tonight. You got to take them to lead after 6, lead after 9, win all the singles points. Sahith gets to play Kisner twice in head-to-head singles. One of them is on like a weird par 3, but the second one's on a par 5 that's 590 yards long. Sahith hits it like 320 in here. Kisner hits it 285. You all do the math, but you could load up on LA and you could build your billfold a little bit for the Amex this week.
Last one. What's Wyndham Clark up to? Is he looking all right these days?
Wyndham Clark, I was in here a couple weeks ago. It was the Bay versus Atlanta Drive, and Wyndham still looks a little edgy. Now, in TGL, he tends to have a lot of fun because he loves to like hammer press bet and do all of these things, and he loves to just swing as hard as he can into the screen. So it really kind of suits his personality, but he still seems like he's internally grinding a little bit. So if I was like a, one of those like T signs or something like that, or a locker room door, I would still be a little bit worried.
Keith Stewart, readtheline.com. You can follow me at the PME. I'll be live Wednesday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern time. You got questions? You bring them to the chat, all right? I might, not promising, but I might have some of the viewers on with me to ask some of their questions. As long as it goes well, we'll see how that works. Smash the like, sub to the channel while you're here, and rate and review the audio podcast. Please, my newsletter will be out on Wednesday afternoon, both in your inbox if you're subbed for free to Mayo Media Network or on BetSportsGolf.com. All right, I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!